France, 2024. Part 1. The Pain of the Past. In a small, picturesque town nestled deep in the heart of the French countryside, where cobblestone streets wound through fields of lavender and ancient stone buildings stood as silent witnesses to the passage of time, lived a young boy named Lucas Tremblay. The town, with its quiet charm and close-knit community, seemed like the perfect place to grow up, but for Lucas, it was a place of quiet pain and unspoken fears. Lucas was a boy of slight build, with sandy blonde hair that fell in gentle waves over his forehead and deep, expressive blue eyes that seemed to hold the weight of the world. He was a gentle soul, sensitive and kind, with a heart too big for the world around him. But his gentleness made him a target. In a place where strength was often measured by physical prowess and loud voices, Lucas's quiet nature was misunderstood, seen not as a virtue but as a weakness. Every morning, Lucas would walk to the town's only elementary school, his small feet scuffing against the well-worn path that led from his home on the outskirts of town to the school's imposing wooden doors. The school itself was an old stone building, its walls thick with history and the echoes of generations of children who had passed through its halls. To most, it was a place of learning and laughter, but to Lucas, it was a place of dread. In the schoolyard, Lucas would often find himself drawn to the old oak tree that stood at the far edge of the playground. The tree was ancient, its gnarled branches reaching out like the protective arms of an old friend. It was a place of solace for Lucas, where he could escape the noise of the playground and lose himself in daydreams of a better life, one where he was strong, respected, and free from the taunts that followed him wherever he went. But the sanctuary of the oak tree was always short-lived. It was there, in the shadow of its sprawling branches, that Lucas was often cornered by a group of older boys who took pleasure in his misery. Maxime, the ringleader, was a boy who seemed to thrive on the pain of others. He was tall for his age, with dark hair that fell into his eyes and a cruel smile that never quite reached his cold, calculating gaze. Maxime's friends followed his lead, circling Lucas like vultures, eager to pick at the scraps of his dignity. "Hey, look who it is, little Lucas the mouse," Maxime would sneer, his voice dripping with mockery as he shoved Lucas against the rough bark of the tree. The other boys would laugh, echoing Maxime's insults, their voices blending into a cacophony of cruelty that rang in Lucas's ears long after the torment had ended. They would push him, trip him, and steal his lunch, tossing it into the dirt as they laughed at his expense. Lucas, too frightened and too kind-hearted to fight back, would simply stand there, his head bowed, tears welling in his eyes as he endured their taunts in silence. Every day felt like a battle he could never win, and the weight of their words pressed down on him like a heavy stone, crushing his spirit. Lucas's only escape from the daily torment was the walk home, where the winding path through the fields of lavender offered a brief reprieve from the harshness of the world. The scent of the flowers filled the air, a sweet fragrance that seemed to soothe his troubled heart, if only for a moment. He would often stop at the small stream that cut through the fields, watching as the water flowed over smooth stones, its gentle murmur a comforting sound in the stillness of the countryside. It was during these quiet moments, with the sun setting low on the horizon and the world bathed in the soft glow of twilight, that Lucas would allow himself to dream. He would imagine a future where he was no longer the target of bullies, where he had grown strong and confident, a protector of those who couldn't protect themselves. He dreamed of becoming a police officer, like the ones he had seen patrolling the town, their uniforms crisp and their expressions stern but kind. To Lucas, the police were more than just enforcers of the law. They were symbols of justice, of righting wrongs and protecting the vulnerable. In his mind, they were heroes, and he longed to be like them. It became his dream, his silent vow to himself, that one day he would don the uniform and show the world that strength wasn't about how big you were or how loud you could shout, but about how much you were willing to stand up for what was right. At home, Lucas kept these dreams to himself. His parents, though loving and supportive, were unaware of the extent of his suffering at school. Lucas didn't want to burden them with his troubles. His father, a hard-working man with calloused hands and a gentle heart, had always taught Lucas the importance of kindness and patience. "Turn the other cheek," his father would say, quoting the Bible as he ruffled Lucas's hair. "Remember, son, God sees everything. He knows your heart." And so Lucas endured, holding on to his father's words, even as the pain of the bullying threatened to consume him. At night, he would kneel by his bedside, his small hands clasped together in prayer. He would pray for strength, for courage, and for the ability to forgive those who hurt him. He believed, with the unwavering faith of a child, that God had a plan for him, that these trials were shaping him into the person he was meant to become. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, but the bullying never stopped. It became a constant in Lucas's life, a shadow that followed him wherever he went. But despite the pain, something inside Lucas began to change. The more the bullies pushed him, the more he pushed back, not with fists or harsh words, but with resilience. He refused to let them break him. Every time they knocked him down, he got back up, a little stronger, a little more determined. He began to see the world differently. The small acts of kindness he witnessed, a teacher's gentle encouragement, a stranger's smile, became beacons of light in the darkness of his days. Lucas realized that there was still goodness in the world, that not everyone was like Maxime and his gang. He found strength in his faith, in the belief that he was not alone, that God was with him every step of the way. And so, Lucas held on to his dream, nurturing it in the quiet corners of his heart, even as the world around him seemed intent on crushing it. He knew that one day he would rise above the pain, that one day he would prove to the world, and to himself, that he was more than the sum of his scars. He would become the protector he had always wanted to be, not just for himself, but for those who couldn't protect themselves. The seeds of resilience, planted in the soil of his suffering, began to take root. Lucas was no longer just a victim. He was a survivor, a young boy with a heart full of dreams and a spirit forged in the fires of adversity. And though the road ahead was long and fraught with challenges, Lucas knew that he would walk it with his head held high, guided by the light of his faith and the strength of his resolve. Part 2. The Journey to Strength. The years passed, and the pain of Lucas Tremblay's childhood began to fade into the background, replaced by a burning determination that drove him forward. The small, shy boy who had once been the target of relentless bullying had grown into a young man with a purpose. He had set his sights on becoming a police officer, a dream that had been nurtured in the quiet moments of his youth. And now, at 18, he was ready to make that dream a reality. The police academy, located on the outskirts of Paris, was a sprawling complex of buildings and training fields, a place where young men and women were molded into the protectors of society. The grounds were vast, with expansive fields where cadets ran drills, obstacle courses designed to test their endurance and agility, and state-of-the-art facilities for firearms training and combat simulations. The academy was not just a school, it was a crucible, where only the strongest and most dedicated would emerge as police officers. Lucas arrived at the academy with a mixture of excitement and nerves. The moment he stepped onto the training grounds, he felt the weight of his decision, the realization that this was the beginning of a journey that would define the rest of his life. The air was thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and the distant sounds of cadets shouting commands as they ran through their drills. The atmosphere was one of discipline and focus, a place where weakness was not tolerated, and only the best would succeed. From the very first day, Lucas threw himself into the rigorous training with everything he had. The days at the academy were long and grueling, starting before the sun had even risen and often stretching late into the night. Mornings began with physical conditioning, where the cadets were pushed to their limits with punishing runs, strength training, and obstacle courses that left them drenched in sweat and gasping for breath. Lucas, though not the biggest or the strongest, was determined to keep up. He ran with a quiet intensity, his mind focused on the image of the police officers he had admired as a child, their uniforms crisp, their movements precise and confident. The obstacle course was a particular challenge, designed to test not just physical strength but mental toughness. It was a grueling series of hurdles, rope climbs, and wall scaling that left even the most athletic cadets struggling. But Lucas faced each challenge with a resolve that came not just from his desire to succeed, but from the deep well of strength he had built up over years of enduring pain and rejection. Every time he stumbled or fell, he got back up, driven by the memories of his past and the promise of his future. Afternoons were spent in the classroom, where the cadets learned the intricacies of the law, the ethics of policing, and the tactics they would need in the field. The instructors were seasoned officers, men and women who had spent decades on the force, and their lessons were steeped in the hard-won knowledge of real-world experience. Lucas absorbed everything they taught with the same intensity he brought to the physical training. He was determined not just to be strong, but to be smart, to understand the law inside and out, and to be prepared for any situation he might face. But it wasn't just the physical and academic challenges that Lucas had to overcome. The academy was a place where competition was fierce, where the cadets were constantly being tested and ranked against each other. Friendships were formed, but so were rivalries, and the pressure to succeed was immense. Lucas found himself once again an outsider, not because of bullying, but because of the quiet determination that set him apart from his peers. He was not there to make friends or to prove himself to others. He was there to fulfill a promise he had made to himself long ago. The nights at the academy were quiet, the dormitory filled with the soft sounds of exhausted cadets sleeping after a long day of training. But Lucas often found it hard to sleep. His mind would race with thoughts of the day's lessons, the challenges he had faced, and the ones that lay ahead. He would lie in his narrow bed, staring up at the ceiling, replaying every moment in his mind, analyzing what he could have done better, how he could improve. And then, when the weight of the day became too much, he would slip out of bed, pull on his running shoes, and head out to the track. The academy track was a simple dirt oval, but to Lucas, it was a place of solace. Under the cover of darkness, with the stars shining above and the cool night air brushing against his skin, Lucas would run. He ran not to train his body, but to clear his mind, to let go of the doubts and fears that clung to him like shadows. Each lap around the track was a reminder of why he was there, a reaffirmation of the promise he had made to himself as a child. With each step, he felt the burdens of the past fall away, replaced by a growing sense of purpose. It was during these solitary runs that Lucas would pray, his breath coming in steady rhythm with his steps. He prayed for strength, for guidance, and for the courage to face whatever challenges lay ahead. He prayed for the wisdom to make the right decisions, for the patience to endure the trials of training, and for the faith to believe in himself, even when the odds seemed stacked against him. These prayers, whispered into the night air, became his anchor, grounding him in the belief that he was exactly where he was meant to be. As the weeks turned into months, Lucas's hard work began to pay off. He became faster, stronger, and more confident in his abilities. The instructors took notice of his progress, often calling him out as an example to others. But it wasn't just his physical prowess that set him apart. It was his determination, his resilience, and the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from within him. Lucas was not the loudest or the most charismatic, but he was undeniably one of the best. One of the most challenging aspects of the training was the tactical simulations, where cadets were put through realistic scenarios designed to test their ability to think quickly and act decisively under pressure. These simulations were intense, often simulating dangerous situations like hostage crises or armed robberies. Lucas approached each simulation with a calm focus, his mind honed by years of enduring hardship. He understood that in real life, there were no second chances, and he treated each exercise as if lives depended on it. In one particularly challenging simulation, Lucas was tasked with leading a team of cadets to apprehend a group of armed suspects who had taken hostages in a warehouse. The simulation was designed to push the cadets to their limits, testing not only their tactical skills but their ability to lead under pressure. As the team leader, Lucas knew that every decision he made could mean the difference between success and failure. He moved through the simulation with precision, directing his team with clear, calm orders, always staying one step ahead of the situation. When the simulation ended, Lucas's team had successfully completed the mission with no casualties. The instructors praised his leadership and his ability to stay cool under pressure, qualities that would serve him well in the field. But for Lucas, the simulation was more than just a test. It was a confirmation that he was on the right path. He had faced a challenge, risen to the occasion, and proved to himself that he was capable of handling whatever the world threw at him. As the months at the academy drew to a close, Lucas felt a sense of accomplishment that was unlike anything he had ever known. He had come to the academy as a young man with a dream, but he was leaving as a police officer, fully trained and ready to take on the responsibilities that came with the badge. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had forged him into the man he had always wanted to be: strong, courageous, and ready to protect those who could not protect themselves. The day of graduation was a moment of triumph for Lucas. Dressed in his new uniform, the crisp fabric a symbol of everything he had worked for, Lucas stood among his fellow cadets, his heart swelling with pride. As he marched onto the parade ground, the sun shining brightly overhead, Lucas knew that this was just the beginning. The pain of his past had shaped him, but it had not defined him. He had taken that pain and turned it into strength, and now he was ready to step into the future with confidence and faith. The ceremony was a blur of speeches and applause, but the moment that stayed with Lucas was when he received his badge. As the instructor pinned it to his uniform, Lucas felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of pride, relief, and gratitude. He had made it. He had fulfilled the promise he had made to himself as a child, and he had done it with integrity and determination. But as he looked out at the faces of his family in the crowd, he knew that his journey was far from over. The real challenges lay ahead, in the streets of Paris, where he would face dangers and decisions that would test everything he had learned. But Lucas was ready. He had been tested, refined, and strengthened by the fires of adversity. He had been forged into a man of faith and resolve, a man who was ready to serve, protect, and stand up for what was right. And as he left the academy that day, his badge gleaming in the sunlight, Lucas knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he would face them with the same quiet strength that had carried him through his darkest days. Part 3. The Call of Duty. It was a crisp, clear morning in Paris, the kind that filled the air with a sense of possibility. The sun was just beginning to climb above the skyline, casting a warm, golden light over the iconic streets. The city was waking up, its residents going about their daily routines, unaware that this day would soon be anything but ordinary. Lucas Tremblay, now a fully trained and seasoned police officer, was on his morning patrol, his footsteps echoing on the cobblestone streets as he made his way through the bustling neighborhoods of downtown Paris. He had been on the force for several years, and in that time, he had earned a reputation as a calm, steady presence, a man who could be relied upon in the most challenging situations. The years of training and the trials he had faced had forged him into a skilled and confident officer, but they had also deepened his sense of duty and his commitment to protecting those in need. As he walked, Lucas's eyes scanned the streets, taking in the familiar sights: the cafes opening their doors, the shopkeepers arranging their displays, the commuters hurrying to work. It was a scene of everyday life, one that Lucas had come to cherish in his role as a protector of the city. But beneath the surface, Lucas was always alert, always aware that danger could strike at any moment, in the most unexpected places. And then, as if on cue, the call came through his radio, a voice crackling with urgency, announcing a robbery in progress at a bank just a few blocks away. Lucas's heart rate quickened as he absorbed the information. It wasn't just any robbery. There were hostages involved, and the situation was quickly escalating. Without a moment's hesitation, Lucas turned on his heel and sprinted toward the bank, his mind racing through the possibilities, the scenarios he might face when he arrived. As he approached the scene, the streets began to fill with the sound of sirens, their wail cutting through the morning air like a knife. The bank was a large, stately building, its stone facade imposing, a symbol of security and stability in the heart of the city. But today, it had become the epicenter of fear and chaos. Police cars had already begun to surround the building, their lights flashing urgently as officers moved to establish a perimeter. Lucas quickly assessed the situation, his training kicking in as he took in the scene. The bank's large glass windows were covered with thick blinds, obscuring the view inside, but the tension in the air was palpable. The officers on the scene were setting up barricades, their faces set with grim determination as they prepared for the worst. The crowd of onlookers that had gathered on the opposite side of the street was growing, their faces a mixture of fear and curiosity. Lucas's mind was focused, his thoughts clear as he approached the commanding officer on the scene. "What's the situation?" he asked, his voice steady. "5 armed suspects inside," the officer replied, his expression tense. "They've taken hostages, staff and customers. We haven't been able to make contact with them yet, and we're still assessing the layout of the bank. It's a volatile situation, and were trying to avoid any unnecessary risks. Lucas nodded, his mind already working through the options. He knew that time was of the essence. Every second that passed increased the danger to the hostages inside. But he also knew that a direct assault could lead to disaster. The situation required a careful, measured approach, one that would minimize the risk to the hostages while neutralizing the threat posed by the robbers. As he considered the options, Lucas felt a deep sense of responsibility settle over him. He had faced difficult situations before, but this was different. This was a moment where lives hung in the balance, where his actions could mean the difference between life and death. And as that realization hit him, Lucas did what he always did in moments of uncertainty. He turned to his faith. Stepping away from the bustle of the scene, Lucas found a quiet corner, away from the prying eyes of the crowd. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath as he centered himself, blocking out the noise and chaos around him. In that moment, he prayed, not for himself, but for the people inside the bank, for the strength and wisdom to do what needed to be done, and for God's protection over everyone involved. When he opened his eyes, Lucas felt a calm wash over him, a clarity of purpose that steadied his nerves. He knew what he had to do. He approached the commanding officer once more, his voice firm. "I'm going in." The officer looked at him, surprise flickering across his face. "Alone?" Lucas nodded. "I know the layout of the bank, and I have experience in tactical operations. I can move more quickly and quietly on my own. We can't afford to wait. Those people need our help now." The officer hesitated, clearly weighing the risks. But there was something in Lucas's demeanor, in the quiet determination that radiated from him, that made the officer trust his judgment. After a brief moment, the officer nodded. "All right, but be careful. We'll be ready to move in if things go south." Lucas gave a sharp nod of acknowledgement, then turned his attention to the task ahead. He approached the bank's side entrance, a service door that was often used by staff to avoid the main lobby. It was locked, but Lucas quickly and quietly picked the lock, his movements smooth and precise. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit hallway that led deeper into the building. Moving with practiced stealth, Lucas entered the bank, his senses heightened, every muscle in his body tense with anticipation. The hallway was narrow, with several doors branching off into offices and storage rooms. Lucas knew the layout well. He had studied the building's blueprints as part of his training, and he quickly made his way toward the main lobby where the hostages were likely being held. As he approached the lobby, Lucas slowed his pace, his movements careful and deliberate. He could hear the muffled voices of the robbers, their tone aggressive as they barked orders at the terrified hostages. The sound of a woman crying cut through the air, sending a surge of determination through Lucas's veins. He had to act, and he had to act fast. Peering around the corner, Lucas caught his first glimpse of the scene. The robbers were scattered around the lobby, their weapons trained on the hostages, who were huddled together in fear. The robbers were tense, their eyes darting around the room as they tried to maintain control. It was clear that they were growing increasingly desperate, their nerves fraying as the minutes ticked by. Lucas knew he needed to take them out quickly, one by one, without alerting the others. It was a risky move, but it was the best chance he had of saving the hostages. He waited for the right moment, his breath steady, his heart pounding in his chest. And then, when one of the robbers turned his back to check on the hostages, Lucas made his move. He moved silently, like a shadow, slipping into the lobby and positioning himself behind the first robber. With a swift, precise motion, Lucas disarmed him, pulling him into a chokehold and rendering him unconscious before the man even realized what was happening. He lowered the robber to the ground, ensuring that his fall made no noise, then quickly moved to the next target. The second robber was pacing near the teller's counter, his focus on the hostages. Lucas used the cover of the counter to approach him from behind, his movements swift and fluid. In an instant, the second robber was down, his weapon safely in Lucas's hands. 2 down, 3 to go. As Lucas moved toward the third robber, he noticed that the remaining 2 had begun to grow suspicious, their voices rising as they called out to their fallen comrades. Lucas knew that the element of surprise was slipping away, but he couldn't afford to lose focus. He continued his methodical approach, taking down the third robber with the same quiet efficiency. The fourth robber, realizing something was wrong, turned just in time to see Lucas approaching. Panic flashed in his eyes, and he raised his weapon, but Lucas was faster. With a well-aimed strike, Lucas disarmed him, knocking him to the ground and immobilizing him before the man could fire a single shot. Now only one robber remained, and he was fully aware that something was amiss. His eyes darted around the room. Fear and desperation etched across his face as he held his weapon tightly. The hostages were frozen in fear, their eyes wide as they watched the scene unfold. Lucas knew he had to act quickly. He approached the final robber with a steady calm, his voice firm as he called out to him, "It's over. Put the weapon down." The robber turned, his eyes wild as he faced Lucas. For a moment, it seemed as though he might fire, but then something in Lucas's unwavering gaze caused him to hesitate. The robber's shoulders sagged, the fight leaving him as he realized that he was outmatched. Slowly, he lowered his weapon, dropping it to the floor with a clatter. Lucas moved forward, securing the man and ensuring that he posed no further threat. The entire confrontation had lasted only a few minutes, but to Lucas, it felt like an eternity. As he surveyed the scene, he saw the hostages beginning to realize that they were safe, their expressions shifting from fear to relief. The police outside, alerted by the sound of the final robber's weapon hitting the floor, stormed the bank, ready to take control. But when they entered, they found the robbers already subdued, their weapons confiscated, and Lucas standing among the hostages, his expression calm but intense. The hostages began to rise, their movements hesitant as they processed the fact that the nightmare was over. It was then that Lucas noticed the familiar faces among them. Faces from his past, faces he had tried to forget. Maxime, the ringleader of the bullies who had tormented him all those years ago, was there, his eyes wide with shock as he realized who had saved him. Lucas's heart skipped a beat as he locked eyes with Maxime. The memories of his childhood, the pain, the fear, came rushing back in an instant. But as he looked into Maxime's eyes, he saw something else. Fear, yes, but also remorse. In that moment, Lucas understood that this was a turning point, not just for the hostages, but for himself as well. Maxime took a hesitant step forward, his voice shaking as he spoke. "Lucas, I never thought I'd see you again, and certainly not like this. You saved us." Lucas stood still, his mind racing. The boy who had once been tormented now stood as a protector, a hero in the eyes of those who had once mocked him. But more than that, he stood as a man who had risen above the pain of his past, who had found strength in his faith and his purpose. Lucas took a deep breath, his voice steady as he replied, "I did what I had to do. We all have a role to play, and today this was mine." Maxime nodded, tears welling in his eyes as he took in the gravity of the situation. "I'm sorry, Lucas, for everything we did to you. We were wrong, and I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed to say it." Lucas felt a wave of emotion wash over him, but it was not anger or bitterness, it was peace. He had forgiven Maxime a long time ago, in the quiet moments of prayer that had sustained him through the darkest days. And now, standing here, he felt the weight of the past lift, replaced by the understanding that he had been brought to this moment for a reason. "I forgave you a long time ago," Lucas said quietly. "We were kids, and we all made mistakes. What matters now is what we do moving forward." Maxime nodded, his expression one of deep gratitude and regret. "Thank you, Lucas. I don't deserve it, but thank you." The tension in the room began to dissipate as the hostages and officers processed what had just happened. The robbers were escorted out in handcuffs, their expressions defeated, while the hostages were guided to safety, their relief palpable. As the scene cleared, Lucas stood alone for a moment, taking in the aftermath of the event. He had faced down a nightmare, not just in the form of the armed robbers, but in the memories of his past. And he had emerged stronger, not just as a police officer, but as a man who had found peace in forgiveness and purpose in his calling. The sun was higher in the sky now, its light streaming through the windows of the bank, casting long shadows on the floor. Lucas felt the warmth of the sun on his face, a reminder of the light that had guided him through the darkness. He closed his eyes for a moment, offering a silent prayer of thanks for the strength and protection that had carried him through the day. And as he stepped out of the bank, the crowd that had gathered outside erupted into applause, their cheers echoing through the streets. But Lucas didn't hear them. His thoughts were elsewhere, on the road that had led him here, and the path that lay ahead. He knew that his journey was far from over, but he was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. With his faith as his guide and his purpose as his anchor, Lucas walked forward, ready to continue his mission to protect and serve, with the knowledge that he had been shaped not just by his past, but by the choices he had made and the strength he had found within himself. Part 4. The Power of Forgiveness. The bank's lobby, once a scene of chaos and terror, now lay in a surreal quiet, the only sounds the soft murmur of relieved hostages and the subdued commands of police securing the area. Lucas stood in the center of the lobby, his breathing finally slowing as the adrenaline that had fueled his daring rescue ebbed away. The air was still heavy with the tension of the ordeal, but now there was also a palpable sense of relief. As the police handcuffed the last of the subdued robbers, Lucas's gaze wandered over the faces of the hostages. Among them, he recognized individuals from his past, the very ones who had tormented him in his youth. Their eyes met his, filled with a complex mix of shame, gratitude, and disbelief. They had known Lucas as the quiet, gentle boy who had suffered their cruelty, and now they saw him as the man who had saved their lives. Maxime, the ringleader of his childhood bullies, approached Lucas with hesitant steps. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by a humbling gratitude. "Lucas, I don't know how to thank you," Maxime stammered, his voice cracking. "You saved us, despite everything we did to you back then." Lucas looked at Maxime, his eyes reflecting a calm that came from deep forgiveness. "Today isn't about the past," Lucas responded quietly. "It's about this moment and how we move forward. Helping you wasn't a choice about past grudges. It was about doing what's right." The other former bullies, witnessing this exchange, gathered around, their own faces etched with similar expressions of remorse. One by one, they offered their apologies, each word sincere and filled with the regret of years past. Lucas listened, nodding slowly, his heart lightening with each apology. This was not a victory of revenge, but a testament to his faith and the teachings of compassion and forgiveness that had guided him through life. "Thank you for your apologies," Lucas finally said, his voice resonant in the now quiet bank. Forgiveness is a powerful thing. It doesn't change the past, but it does enlarge the future. Today, you all have a chance to change, to choose kindness over cruelty. The police began to escort the hostages outside, and Lucas helped a few shaken individuals to their feet, offering them a supportive arm. As they walked towards the exit, the once hostile gazes of the onlookers transformed into expressions of respect and admiration for the man who had faced down danger not just with courage but with unparalleled humanity. As they stepped out of the bank, the crisp air of the Paris morning felt refreshing. The crowd that had gathered erupted into applause as Lucas and the other officers led the hostages to safety. Amid the clapping, Lucas heard his name being chanted, a hero's welcome for the boy who had grown up under the shadow of adversity and emerged as a beacon of hope and strength. Lucas stood outside the bank, the morning sun casting long shadows on the ground. He felt the weight of the medal pinned on his chest earlier that morning during a brief ceremony, a symbol of bravery and service. Yet, in his heart, he knew this moment transcended any decoration or accolade. It was about the impact one can have by choosing forgiveness over bitterness, love over hatred. The mayor of Paris, having arrived at the scene, approached Lucas, his expression one of profound respect. "Officer Tremblay, your actions today have not only saved lives but shown us the strength of character that truly makes a hero. Paris is indebted to you," the mayor said, shaking Lucas's hand firmly. Lucas nodded, accepting the gratitude but feeling the true reward was something far more personal and profound. "Thank you, sir," he replied. "But today, I was merely a servant doing God's work. It was not just my training, but my faith that guided me through today's challenges." As the crowd continued to applaud, Lucas's thoughts turned inward, to the prayers he had whispered during the darkest times, to the divine strength that had carried him through. He knew his journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more opportunities to serve and make a difference. But today, he had not only confronted his past, but had transformed it into a force for good. Lucas's story, one of pain turned to triumph, of bullying turned to bravery, would resonate far beyond the streets of Paris. It was a testament to the power of forgiveness and the undeniable strength of the human spirit guided by faith and compassion. As the event drew to a close, Lucas did not celebrate. He simply offered a silent prayer of thanks, looking up at the clear blue sky. He knew this moment was just a part of his ongoing journey. A journey marked by a commitment to serve, protect, and above all, uphold the values of justice and mercy. And as he prepared to leave the scene, his heart was full, not of pride, but of peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing he had acted rightly, that he had honored his faith, his upbringing, and his own inner convictions. Today, Lucas had been a guardian not just of safety but of souls, including his own. And as he walked back to his patrol car, the streets of Paris no longer seemed just a backdrop to his life, but a canvas on which he could paint a legacy of hope, courage, and forgiveness. Part 5. A Hero's Grace. The day had drawn to a close, and the town square in Paris was thronged with people. Their faces turned towards the stage that had been set up in front of the old city hall, a grand building with ornate architecture that spoke of history and heritage. The square was festively decorated, with blue and white banners fluttering in the gentle evening breeze, and the setting sun cast a warm golden hue over the scene, creating an atmosphere of celebration and communal pride. Lucas stood behind the curtains at the side of the stage, his police uniform pristine and medals gleaming under the stage lights. Despite the accolades and the admiration of the crowd, he felt a deep sense of humility. Today was not just about his actions. It was a testament to the values he had always held dear: service, bravery, and above all, forgiveness. As the mayor of Paris stepped up to the microphone, the crowd fell silent in anticipation. "Ladies and gentlemen," the mayor began, his voice booming over the speakers, "today we are gathered here to honor a man whose heroic actions have not only saved lives but have shown us the true meaning of courage and selflessness." The mayor recounted the events at the bank, detailing how Lucas had single-handedly subdued the robbers and safeguarded the hostages. "But what makes Officer Lucas Tremblay a true hero," the mayor continued, "is not just his bravery in the face of danger, but his capacity for forgiveness. He has shown us that true strength lies not in vengeance, but in the ability to forgive and move forward." The crowd erupted in applause, their cheers echoing off the surrounding buildings. Lucas stepped forward, his heart full, as the mayor presented him with the city's Medal of Honor, a symbol of extraordinary valor and public service. As he accepted the medal, Lucas felt the weight of the honor, not just as a decoration on his uniform, but as a responsibility to continue living up to the ideals it represented. "Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to everyone here today," Lucas said as he took the microphone, his voice clear and steady. "I stand before you not as a hero, but as a servant of the community." The events at the bank were a test of not only my training as a police officer but of my faith and my convictions. Lucas paused, looking out over the crowd, his eyes reflecting the sincerity of his words. We often think of heroes as characters in stories, as legends, but every one of us can be a hero in our own lives. It's about doing the right thing, even when it's hard, about standing up for what you believe in, and about forgiving those who have wronged us. The square was silent, the audience captivated by his words. "Forgiveness is not a sign of weakness. It is an act of strength," Lucas continued. "It is not forgetting the past, but choosing to rise above it. Today, I ask each of you to look within and find the hero in yourselves. Let us build a community not on the foundations of fear and resentment, but on understanding, compassion, and respect." As he spoke these final words, the square erupted into applause once more, louder and more heartfelt than before. People nodded their heads in agreement, moved by the depth of his message. After the ceremony, as the crowd began to disperse, Lucas stayed, speaking with community members, sharing moments of genuine connection. Many expressed their gratitude, others their admiration, but all saw him as a pillar of the community, a man who had transformed his own trials into a source of collective inspiration. The evening drew to a close with the sky painted in hues of pink and orange, the sun setting behind the city skyline. Lucas stood for a moment alone, looking up at the sky, feeling a profound sense of peace. His journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but he knew that every step had been guided by a higher purpose. As he walked away from the town square, Lucas knew that his story, a story of pain turned to strength, of adversity turned to heroism, would continue to inspire. But more importantly, he knew that his actions had reaffirmed his commitment to live by the principles he held dear: to protect, to serve, and to forgive. In the quiet of the evening, as the city lights began to twinkle like stars brought down to earth, Lucas Tremblay walked home, not as a hero out of the tales of old, but as a man who had faced his past, who had fought for his future, and who had chosen to lead with grace and forgiveness. And in his heart, he carried the quiet confidence of someone who had found his place in the world, not through the accolades he had received, but through the lives he had touched. Today, Lucas had not just saved lives. He had changed them, including his own. And as the stars appeared in the night sky, he felt a deep connection to the world around him, to the city he served, and to the path he had chosen. A path marked by bravery, service, and an unyielding faith in the goodness of people. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment below to share your thoughts and experiences. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories like this one. And share this video with your friends and family who might need a reminder of the power of faith and perseverance. If this journey of faith resonated with you, hit the like button to show your support. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, God bless you.